What's up, everybody? Oh my goodness. Everybody knows that we love top 5 segments. We do them every single week on our podcast Inside the Crazy Ant Farm. So we thought this one would be a lot of fun just to pick each other's brains about and to get a lot of comments about what we put on our list. Now, this one is going to be a video all about the MCU movies, our least to our favorite MCU movies. If you guys didn't know, there are 32 of these bad boys. So creating these lists were a little difficult.
Extremely difficult. You guys got a little tease of it when we did our top 5 least favorite. So you have an idea of at least 5 of them, but where do the rest rank, right? You hear us talk about all the time. I'm hardcore comic book geek, and I have thoughts on the MCU and where everything goes. And I think you're going to be a little surprised by a few of ours. So we want you to interact, comment, tell us if you agree or disagree, tell us why you agree or disagree. Let us have it, man. This is all about interaction. We want to know and hear from you guys.
Exactly. It's going to be really fun, man. It's going to be really fun because it started to get difficult around the early 20s, late teens, that area. After 15, you're like, shit. I feel like I will basically misplace something that actually you really enjoy, but there's just so many that you have to put in that area, so it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. The favorite 5 and the least favorite 5, pretty simple.
Yeah.
And then, from 6 to 15-ish, but I think the hardest for me was between 20 and 26.
Yeah.
Trying to balance where I wanted to throw those in. Could it be a little earlier? Could it be a little later? That was the hard ones for me.
Yeah, I think mine were the teens and then, like you said, the 20s-ish. It's difficult, man. It's difficult. But we're going to start at the very back half, okay? Because we want you guys to know what our least favorite is. And we are on the same boat with this one. And you guys know from our top 5 from ITCAFpodcast that it's Thor 4. Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
Just was awful. Did not enjoy it at all. They tried to capitalize on the comedic aspect of Ragnarok, and in my opinion, they failed.
Yeah, and in the star's opinion, Chris Hemsworth has come out recently and said, we went a little too far. It was a little bit crazy. It didn't work. No shit. For me, the only good thing about this whole thing was Christian Bale.
Yeah.
And had they gone that dark route like they did in the third act with him and brought the seriousness of Thor a little bit in that third act, it would have been a whole different situation. Mm-hmm. But for more than 2/3 of the movie, it was awful. I mean, when he's having this jealousy, I'm in love with my hammer shit, and it's following him around, what the fuck was that?
What is going on?
It was not, and there was so much potential there.
There was.
You had the storyline with Jane Foster and using the hammer to save her, and how that affected her, and how it affected Thor, and you had so much opportunity to go with the right storyline there, which was an amazing storyline in the comic books. When I saw that they were going to do Jane Foster and they were going to, I was all in. Oh my gosh, she's going to be Thor. That means they're going the cancer route. They're going to do. I was so excited, and then we got that piece of shit, and I was what the fuck?
Yeah,
happened?
Because they set Christian Bale up to be this massive bad villain type, but he was really only on screen for maybe 15 minutes of the whole hour and a half movie. So number 32 for both of us, Thor 4. Ugh. Now we start to differentiate, I believe, a little bit on, the placement of these ones, but still around the same area. Number 31 for me is Thor 2. The Dark World. I was not a fan, just that aspect. Like we talk about all the time, they just did not get Thor right in these individualized movies. So I just feel like, that placement right there is adequate for this film.
Same. Thor the Dark World.
Yeah,
I think that they tried to go dark with it, right? Make it a little bit, and it failed so bad, which is why Ragnarok happened. They tried to correct it with comedy, and then they fucked that up by going too far. So they didn't go enough. They didn't go far enough, then they went too far. And these two movies are the perfect example of what too dark doesn't work, too comedic doesn't work. Therefore, our two least favorite Marvel movies.
Yeah, exactly. It only makes sense. Number 30 for me is the original Thor. I'm sure you're sensing a theme here. The Thors are definitely my least favorite quadruple or whatever out of the franchise or out of the universe. Like I said, they're not entertaining to me. They're a little boring. I'm just like, just sitting in the theater, just like, what's the point of all of this? The point is to set up other shit. That was the point, I felt like. So number 30 for me was the original Thor.
Same. Thor. The only time they got Thor right, and this is not at all a dig on Hemsworth. He's amazing in the role. He's a brilliant Thor, but it's on the filmmakers. I'm sorry, but the only time they got him right is in the movies. And I think the most right they got him is in Infinity War and Endgame. That is Thor. That's the Thor. There's a little joke here or there, but this is a fucking god, and he knows he's a god, and he's a badass. That's Thor.
Thor.
The jokes with Thor is because he's a god and he knows he's better than everybody else, basically, and he jokes around to that. He's arrogant. The jokes are meant to be arrogance. And so we'll get to that, though. But yeah, I agree with you, Thor. It just...
Okay, so now I think this is where we start to differ a little bit.
Yes.
Number 29 for me is Hulk. And everybody knows I said it on my top 5 for ITCAF that I'm not an Ed Norton fan. Him in this universe, I feel like just felt out of place for me. So I wasn't a fan at all. And I felt like, I wanted to see the, what was it? The Gamma Dogs? The Gamma Dogs from that other Hulk movie? The Incredible Hulk, or which was, yes. Number 29 for me is Hulk.
Thank God the Incredible Hulk is not a part of the MCU. That was fucking God. Emerald Green? We're not going to fucking Oz. It's the Hulk. I mean, and Gamma Dogs. And yes, he gets bigger as he gets stronger. But that fucking like King Kong size Hulk. Oh my God, that fucking piece of shit
They
sucked.
ain't got shit on him, okay?
No, man, they sucked. But mine is Thor Ragnarok. And I'll tell you why, because I can't help but put all the Thors at my least favorite. Okay, so my number 29 is Thor Ragnarok. Now, while I think it is the best solo Thor movie out of all of them, and there were aspects of Thor that were right. The relationship between him and Hulk was great. Like, the I'm a badass, and the little bit with Thanos kind of stuff. That was all good. Beyond all that, it fucking sucked. But I loved Hulk. This should have been a Hulk movie. I would have been kind of okay with it. It wouldn't be this far up on my list of least favorites. But because I liked their dynamic. In fact, the only reason I like this movie is because of their dynamic. And the way they got Thor right was when he was interacting with Hulk. And so... but other than that, I did not like it. Again, there was so much potential with Valkyrie and all the different things with Smart Hulk and all these things they could have gone and they didn't. So I love everything they got right, but unfortunately for me, the majority of it was not right, and so it's up there. Yeah, my least favorite. All the Thor movies.
All the Thor movies. Now we're on 28. 28 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Now this is basically majority about the villain. I explained a little bit about this on our top 5 as well. I really did not like the whole I'm your dad, but I'm also a planet and I killed your mom and all this shit. I'm just like, what? What is going on? Like, give me the I loved the first one. I loved Guardians of the Galaxy, the original with Ronan, and actually having like a big baddie type of character. But when you got a planet and it's kind of that mind fuckery. And then at the end where he literally transforms into the planet and like all this stuff, I'm just like, what are we seeing here right now? So that's why I put it at 28 for me. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
And James Gunn, he's going to go over the top. Look at the giant star, kind of a thing in Suicide Squad. He's going to do that. And but I'm with you there, and I'll give you my thoughts on that one. But my number 28 is basically for the same reason. My number 28, and I hate to say this because you guys know I've long said Favreau is one of my all-time inspirations. I think he's a brilliant director, and I love pretty much everything he does. But my number 28, Iron Man 2, for the same reason. It was the most horrible rendition of Whiplash I've ever seen in my life. It fucking sucked. Mickey Rourke was awful. He looked like some drunk stumbling, I don't even know. This whole movie just did not work for me. It it felt forced. It felt hurried. I mean, if you look at the difference between when they came out, right? It's just 2 years. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was a filler movie, and I felt like its only purpose was to introduce Black Widow. And they could have done that in Iron Man 1.
That's fair.
End of Iron Man 1 somewhere. They could have plopped that in there, and it would have been fine. They could have done that in Hulk. Now that we knew that there was a little backstory between Hulk and Black Widow, they could have done that in Hulk. I just feel like it didn't work. It was rushed. The villain sucked, and you could have introduced Black Widow anywhere. So it did not work for me. So that's why my number 28, Iron Man 2.
I understand. Number 27 for me is Captain America: First Avenger. It's very low on the list because Cap is honestly not one of my favorites. But I will say that his movies are probably, they're not the best trilogy out, or the however many four that are going to be in the franchise. It is one of the best, but him as a character is not one of my favorites. I don't know. He grew on me as the films progressed and as more of them came out. And where he's at now, where he was at in Endgame, I feel like, is my favorite version of Cap. But I don't know. I'm never that big of a fan of, you gotta follow the straight and narrow, mind your P's and Q's. Like, I get it. I get where he's coming from, where his time period and all that stuff. Language, freaking Avengers, Age of Ultron. But, I just feel like, with him not being my favorite character, of course, the origin story of him is not going to be one of my favorite movies. But like I said, I love that they Easter egg dropped, Bucky Barnes, because they set up that for future Cap movies and Avengers movies. But yeah, I know I couldn't put it anywhere close to the middle of the road. So that's why I got to put number 7, Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yeah, I can't I can't agree on that, and we'll get to that. He's one of my favorites for the very reason you said you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, to be the hero that can't cross the line.
Yeah.
It's like DC's Superman. But
yeah.
We'll get to that when I get to it.
Yeah.
But my number 27 is, again, I have a hard time saying this Iron Man 3. And I really like Iron Man. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's like, yo, he's dogging Iron Man. Right. You'll see how high Iron Man is at the top of my list when we get there. But, again, this movie just felt like we need a filler. And we need to get him from the armor that's like attached to the living armor that he eventually becomes. And this is our quick, easy way to do it. And I just felt like they could have done that a gazillion other ways. And I felt like they didn't have to do a whole movie on it. Mm-hmm. And it just, for that reason, it just, again, I don't like when they just use a filler movie to introduce a plot point. It's a plot point. You can literally just put that in anything else. You don't need a whole movie to say this is the transition of his armor, right? I mean, he's basically telling you about the transitions of his armor in all the movies. You don't need a whole movie to see it. I did like the kid. I did, we're going to see as Iron Lad, no doubt about it. Ty Simpkins. I think that's the correct name. I liked that aspect of it. Again, there were things that I liked, but I just couldn't get behind the whole movie because I just feel like it was, again, a filler movie. Hey, we need a way to show the new armor.
Yeah.
A whole movie to show the new armor? It just, I don't know. I didn't, or how he could control the armor remotely from like everywhere, the whole army of them. Like, we knew he could do that. We didn't need all that. I don't know. I felt like it was unnecessary.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to where that's at on my list. Number 26 for me, and I know this one's kind of lower for you as well, Eternals. I really didn't mind Eternals. Of course, it was that slower burn that, not a lot of people knew about the backstory and who these characters were and, like, what they meant to the MCU. I really just, the slower pacing is very hard for me. If it's not a good story-driven film and it's slower paced, I have a hard time like actually enjoying it. But like I said, I enjoyed the fight sequences. I enjoyed what they set up with, you know, the LGBT community, first superhero, gay superhero, and I enjoyed what they set up with, you know, Cal Harrington, the dude from Game of Thrones character, as the Black Knight, I believe his name is, and Firefox, of course, Harry Styles. But I just, you know, it was that slower burn of a type movie that isn't necessarily good in my opinion. It makes it kind of difficult, but there was certain aspects of this film that I took away that I was like, okay, I'm glad I watched it one time for the one time, but it's definitely not up there on my list. And I feel like that's probably the way it is for a lot of people. So that's why I got it so low. Number 26, The Eternals.
My 26 is Eternals as well.
See?
and I'll tell you what, if they eliminate the complete first act,
yeah, fair,
and the movie was just the second act on, it's way further up on my list of favorite movies.
Yeah.
The whole first act was a way too long process of introducing these characters. We don't need it.
Yeah.
You don't. It doesn't matter if you're not a comic book fan and have no idea who these people are. They didn't worry about that in Guardians. They didn't. James Gunn didn't feel like that was a necessary thing to spend an entire act introducing these characters. He just jumped right in. Here they are. I think that's what was necessary for Eternals.
Yeah.
Nobody would have cared. Nobody would have cared. We did not need an entire act to tell us who these people were. Mm-hmm. And it just made the movie drag. And by the time the second act hit and it starts to pick up, you're already bored with it. Yeah. You're already like, okay, well, I'm going to hang in because I've been here this long.
Might as well, because it was like almost 3 hours.
Yeah, but you kind of lose that excitement. Where had it just come right out of the gate with second act on, I think it's a hit. And I think it's way up further on people's lists had they done that. But
I agree. See, this is where the balance starts shifting, right? We're talking a little bit more about what we like about the movie and, you know, what they could have done better and things like that. So that's what you're going to see continuing on, because it does start to get very difficult from now until probably the top 10, because there's a lot of these movies that I really did enjoy, but I just couldn't put it further than what it is because there's so many more better movies than what these are. Number 25 for me is Ant-Man and the Wasp 2, or Ant-Man and the Wasp, not Ant-Man 2, but Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think I put this one so far down is because, like you said with Iron Man 3, this is kind of just a setup of the quantum realm, right? Kind of just to show what the future of the MCU is going to look like and how deep they're going to dive into it and what characters they're going to use to explore this whole universe and multiverse and things like that. Actually getting what's-her-face, Wasp in the suit, I felt like that was awesome. But, you know, they teased a little bit of that in the original Ant-Man. But, yeah, I just felt like, you know, it was a very middle-of-the-road type of movie. Nothing really stuck out to me from it. Nothing was really, like, awful. But it was just that middle-of-the-road kind of like, okay, it's there. I mean, I'll watch it if it's on, but I'm not going to go on Disney Plus and specifically put Ant-Man and the Wasp on to watch it for enjoyment. So that's my opinion.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. My number 25 is Avengers Age of Ultron. I was let down by this movie. Ultron is one of the greatest villains in Marvel Comics, in my opinion, and what he's done in the Avengers and his individual battles between certain heroes throughout the history of his character, brilliant.
Yeah.
And then they tell me they're casting James Spader, a reunion between James Spader and Robert Downey Jr. I am all in. I'm thinking this is going to be one of the most epic movies ever, because I fucking love James Spader as a villain. And then you're going to make him one of the all-time greatest villains in Marvel.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen for me. It didn't happen for me. It fell short. The trailer was great when he's like, there are no strings attached. Yeah, I just, everything, I was so pumped. And then I felt like this was, again, they used it to set up plot points. They didn't give us everything, right? They set up the Sokovia agreements. They're setting up Civil War. This movie basically set up, here's where we're going to start to see the divide between Iron Man and Cap of what's right and what's wrong, and is this good or is this bad? And the quick introduction of how do we get Scarlet Witch in there? How do we get Quicksilver in there? By the way, why would you introduce Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch and then kill Quicksilver off right away? That didn't make sense to me either. Like, there's a whole story dynamic between those. Quicksilver is one of those questionables. He's willing to do bad things in the right of what he thinks is good.
Yeah.
And there was so much more you could have gone with that character that I felt like they fell short on. So again, this was the setup, in my opinion, for Civil War. It's like, how can we set up the Sokovia Agreement that causes the rift? How can we introduce Scarlet Witch real quick into the mix and do it with a big baddie? And it could have been infinitely better. That said, I don't hate the movie. I think it's a really good movie. I just think it could have been much better than it turned out to be. So that's why it's up there. Avengers: Age of Ultron, my number 25.
I understand. Number 24 for me is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I know. When they were billing this thing as like this horror thriller, you should have like this whole horror, because they didn't really say thriller a lot. They said horror, their first ever like horror film. And I just, going into it, I was expecting that, but there was probably like one jump scare where just Scarlet Witch just like pops out of nowhere. But I mean, other than that, it wasn't a bad movie. Some of the pacing was a little off sometimes, as you'll see throughout my list. Pacing is a big thing for me. So that was really cool. Like what you said when we were talking about this off air, this one is also a setup movie. I feel like, a lot of misguided films for the MCU are really just setup movies for, the big ones, the team collaborative efforts for like the Avengers movies or like Civil War or different things like that. So I get it. I understand. But at the same time, I feel like you could have done things better. But I am excited to see what they do next, because they also teased a lot of stuff. They teased Doctor Strange's wife, that coming into the dynamic, and we love Charlize Theron, so that's going to be really cool. And of course, they teased in What If a certain element of Doctor Strange, and they brought this to live action for this film, so that was really cool. But again, kind of like that middle of the road type of movie, so you can't put it further than what it is. So yep, Doctor Strange number 2 at 24 for me.
Okay, I will give all of my disagreeing opinions on that when we get there. My number 24 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I thought it was a really good movie. The characters were still spot on. He's so good at keeping the characters' continuity correct, right? They don't change from film to film. They are who they are, and they stay who they are, and he's consistent with that, and I love that. But I would agree with you. I have it up there in my 20s because it was just a bit much for me. I get that character is a bit much in the comic books too, but I feel like it could have been a bit more grounded. He grounded the Guardians, if you can possibly do that with a talking tree and a raccoon and everything, right? But they felt grounded. They felt like this could be a real thing, where I feel like you could have gone that route with Ego, but he didn't. Yeah. And he went this big kind of that's where he lost me a little bit on it. I felt like he's done an amazing job with almost all of his films in superhero genres to keep it grounded. And like even with the upcoming Superman, talking about how we have to show most powerful being in the universe, but also a farm boy from Kansas, and he's keeping it grounded. And I just felt like he missed the mark on this one with the villain, so that's why it's there for me.
Oh yeah, for sure, I completely agree. So I feel like I just feel like they approached that differently, but we also know that James Gunn did have to go back and rewrite some stuff.
Yeah, he was told to not. He wasn't allowed to do things that he wanted to do in that film because of future films.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes that can make it really difficult. So.
Oh, for sure. Number 23 for me is Black Widow. Black Widow, number 23. Just because, again, I feel like it's that middle of the road movie to where, like, it was good. I really love Florence Pugh. I really love David Harbour. And just everybody who they had involved with this one. But I don't know. I felt like the pacing wasn't that bad. I shouldn't say. The pacing wasn't that bad, but I did I really liked the villain. What was the villain's name again? The Armorer, or the not the Armorer, but the girl the villain on Black Widow?
Yeah, but it's
escaping your mind too? Okay, fantastic. The comic book guy over here. Taskmaster.
Yeah. No, you threw me off when you said girl because they changed the gender on her. Taskmaster's not like it's so.
So I thought I thought that backstory was a little different, and I didn't necessarily like it all that much. So that's kind of where like I fell, and that's why it kind of fell on my list. Taskmaster is still like a badass character, and it'll be interesting because aren't there different iterations of Taskmaster?
Well, yeah, and they did, yeah.
So maybe if we can go into that with that character in further films, maybe. But yeah, like I said, I think this was kind of just a middle of the road one for me. So number 23, Black Widow.
All right, number 23 for me, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's up there because for me, it failed. It had everything right. It had the story. It had the characters. It's setting up the next big baddie. We're going and we're going to do all this stuff. And then they just fell short. They fell short for me. Kang the Conqueror, y'all. Kang the Conqueror. He didn't really conquer shit. Like he wasn't. They didn't show how powerful a badass he really is. They hint at it throughout the whole movie, but he basically gets bitch slapped at the end. And it's like this guy could have been. I mean, Jonathan Majors. Personal outside stuff aside, because we don't know where that's going. But he's a great actor and a great bad guy, and they could have done him. I think they did a much better job with him in Loki, showing the maniacal, bad guy that he is. They just didn't go. They missed it for me. MODOK, I think they had great opportunity with MODOK, and they kind of failed there. And just overall, I just, you had everything going for it story-wise, and it just didn't click for me. It just missed the target. And that's unfortunate because I like the Ant-Man movies, and I love Paul Rudd, and I think there's a lot of potential there. And obviously with Stinger coming and like the Young Avengers, and there was so much there to explore. But they just, for me, missed the target. I mean, it just didn't hit where it needed to hit for me.
Yeah, I understand that. Number 22 for me is Captain Marvel. I honestly this is where we get into the parts where I'm like, I just like some better than that one. But Captain Marvel for me, I love 90s. Of course, born in the 90s. I'm a 90s child, but love that whole dynamic. I love the Skrull dynamic too. I'm really excited where they like continue on that Secret Invasion. I believe that's where we're going to see more of that, which is coming out soon, or might have already come out depending on when this video comes out. But I'm really excited about that whole storyline. I just feel like, Captain Marvel as a character isn't necessarily my favorite. She's not my least favorite, but she's kind of, just her in general is kind of a middle of the road. And I don't necessarily mind Brie Larson too. I know a lot of people don't like Brie Larson. I don't mind her either. She's just not one of my favorite characters. But I did enjoy the movie though. I thought it was really good, really well done. I love the fucking cat. That was so funny. But and the soundtrack was so good. But again, I think I put it at this point in time on my list just because Captain Marvel just does, as a character, just doesn't do it that much for me. But I enjoyed the movie. I mean, it has nothing to do with the movie. It's just the character. So number 22 for me, Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I just want to preface, I think all these mid-20s, high teens for me could have been interchangeable.
Yeah.
I don't really hate these movies at all. They just needed to fall somewhere on the list. And I couldn't put, I couldn't put them at movies I hated, so and difficult. I couldn't put them at the movies I love the best. So it's just kind of here they are. My number 22 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a really fun movie. I think they capitalized on everything they did right in the first movie. And I was excited for it. And I did. I don't really have a whole lot of bad things to say about it. I just needed to put it somewhere on my list. And the reason I put it at 22 is I felt like it could have been a bit more than it was. I enjoyed it, but I think it could have been a bit more. Again, I think going back to my theme here, we needed a reason to make Hope Wasp. Right? Yeah. We explained that Janet was Wasp, and now we need a reason to suit up Hope. And this was that movie. Okay, somehow we need to make a filler movie to get Hope into the suit. And that's what this movie was. They did a good job. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it worked. But I feel like it could have been more.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying. I wanted more because I did enjoy it. So
yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Number 21 for me is the original Ant-Man. I really enjoyed this one. Again, I love when they started to kind of shift a little bit, and maybe the turn that maybe not a lot of people like, where they started adding more comedic elements into it rather than dramatic elements. Hopefully they switch back, because like we said, we prefer the mostly dramatic with a sprinkle of comedy in there, not the other way around where it's mostly comedy and a sprinkle of dramatic. But yeah, I feel like, this one is a very difficult one to put at this spot, but with just liking more, I just had to put it there. 21 for the original Ant-Man. But again, I really enjoy the character. We love Paul Rudd, but more movies I feel like are better. So,
okay. Yeah. My number 21, Doctor Strange. I liked this movie. I think that Benedict is the perfect Doctor Strange. I think they got the character exactly right. His sense of arrogance, the sense of I know everything, but I don't really know everything. They introduced the sorcerer world in the MCU, and I thought they did it brilliantly. I really have nothing bad to say about this. I don't think they spent too much time on his origin. They got to it quickly about the car accident and why and into the sorcery and everything. I just needed a place to put this one. Right. And again, I don't hate this movie at all. I don't think it deserved to be near the top of my list of most hated, but I don't think it was quite there to be in my list of most favorite just because it's an origin movie. And most of the standard origin movies are kind of like, okay, it's the origin movie. We need this, but then we'll wait for the next one.
Right.
So I don't know. That's why I kind of put it there. It's not like it's mid-level for me. It's a good origin story, but it's not great, but it's not bad. So there you go.
Agreed. All right. So number 20 for me is Iron Man 2. I know you have different opinions on that one. I think it's because I am such an Iron Man lover, and that's by far my favorite superhero in the MCU. So it's hard to kind of even say anything negative about it, even though I understand all of your opinions about it. But yeah, I just the pacing was a little and some of the other stuff is kind of just setups, but I just love any second that Iron Man is on screen, so that's why all of the Iron Man movies are higher maybe than what they're supposed to be. But I just gotta put it higher than what some of the others. So Iron Man 2, number 19.
Just the whole thing for me that epitomizes 20. My whole thought on the entire movie is the scene at the racetrack where the goofy ass suit coming out of the briefcase and just that whole fight right there. That's the whole movie for me. This is the movie, and it wasn't very good.
Yeah, I understand.
My number 20, it's for the same reasons that I just said about Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel. Obviously, I loved all the characters. I'm a huge Captain Marvel fan, and I know where we're getting with her. I hope that we see Binary. I hope that we get there. I think it's going there. I really enjoyed this movie, and I liked how they showed the dynamic of the history between her and Fury and all the different, and Coulson, even bringing back Coulson and showing all that. But it was an origin movie. It was a needed origin movie because we had to get her into the Avengers, and we needed to see who she was and where she came from and how Coulson knew about her. But that's it. It was a good movie. It wasn't a great movie, and it wasn't a bad movie. It's just a good origin movie.
Yeah.
So therefore, right in the middle of my list.
I understand.
20.
I understand.
Captain Marvel.
Number 19 for me is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Again, not a lot good, not a lot bad, but I enjoyed Kang. I understand your thoughts and opinions where, you wanted him to do more, but I enjoyed the quantum realm. I think that's where it kind of fell in the middle of the road for me because it's a beautiful place, and everybody knows I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and it's very reminiscent of the Star Wars universe / galaxy far, far away. So that's why I got to put that one relatively in the middle of the road at number 19, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Well, all right, there you go. My number 19, and I know people are going to disagree with this, but Hulk, the Incredible Hulk. I liked the Incredible Hulk. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie only because it got the character right. It's exactly the way the character is. He's always high anxious. He's always in distress. He's always trying to control his anger. He's always trying to wonder if he's doing the right thing for the greater good. Should he hide the monster? Should he be the monster? He's constantly worried about where he's going, where he's around. Like one of the best lines in there for me is when he's like, seriously, you want to put me in a confined tube underground with a bunch of people? Not a good idea. And then the dynamic between him and Betty and wanting to be with her and loving her, but understanding what it does to put her in danger, and the relationship with the dad. And then they got Hulk right.
Yeah.
The madder he gets, the stronger he gets, the bigger he gets, but it isn't some outrageous, huge, King Kong looking thing. It's just, they got the rage aspect of it right. And I liked the throwback to the series. I thought it was a really nice throwback to the original series with Bill Bixby. The music at the end when he's got the backpack and he's walking off, that's total shout out to the show and how every episode ended. I just really, as a fan of the show, appreciated that. So I like it, and I wish, I think that they did well in the first Avengers movie with Ruffalo taking over and maintaining that Hulk, the rage of it, and wondering, do I keep this, do I not keep this kind of a thing. I thought they carried that over well. But I liked the Incredible Hulk. Number 19 for me.
For sure. Number 18 for me goes to the original Doctor Strange. Again, kind of that intermittent, which it's kind of weird because the things I hold against Doctor Strange is what I like about Iron Man, the cockiness and, all of that different aspect, thinking you're like the best thing, you're the shit. But I don't know, something about the way Benedict did it rather than RDJ, I just felt it was a little off. I don't know, I just didn't like it as much. But again, I like the character, I like what they set up into the different things. And of course, I don't know, the villain at the end where you just keep having to repeat, you keep dying and coming back because it's inevitable and this whole situation is inevitable. I thought that was a little but I enjoyed the first movie, and I do enjoy the character. Doctor Strange is pretty cool for me. So number 18 is the original Doctor Strange.
There you go. My number 18, Captain America, the First Avenger. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It's an origin film, but I've always been a longtime fan of the Red Skull, and I thought it was brilliantly portrayed. I don't think you could have gotten a better actor to play him. I thought they finally got him right, like a guy that's been living in Hitler's shadow and basically trying to overshadow Hitler, which how do you do that? Kind of a thing. I did love the setup and the dynamic between Bucky and Cap, and explaining that relationship, that Bucky was the one that always looked out for him and now it's reversed, and he felt that. The setup with him and Peggy, the lifelong relationship there, I loved that. I really thought that was good. And the Howling Commandos. I mean, come on, man. You had to set up the Howling Commandos. So for an origin story, I thought it was really good. And maybe I like this one. Maybe I have a better affinity for this one than you do, because I also had to sit through the Matt Salinger, his grandson, that horrible version of Captain America live action.
Yeah.
And the horrible 70s TV show live action Captain America. And so when they finally got it right, I was like, yeah, because those did not get it right anywhere close. So I think that's maybe why I like this one a bit more than you, because it was a really good interpretation straight from the comics too, and I liked it. The underdog,
kind of like a you finally got it right type of situation.
Yeah, and who doesn't like the underdog kicking ass?
Yeah,
exactly.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah,
number 17 for me goes to the original Guardians. Again, the kind of middle of the road, just where nothing really was wrong with it. Just new characters, and it's an origin story. But I just had to put it in the middle of the road. So number 17 for me, Guardians 1, Volume 1.
Number 17 for me, also a Guardians, but it's the latest one, Volume 3, and much for the same reason. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was done perfectly. I think it was a nice way to rebound Marvel, who had been missing. James Gunn brought it back on track, but this was just very much a close-up of the characters. We spent a little too much time, in my opinion, on Rocket's past. We could have done that quicker, in my opinion, and gotten to the other stuff a little bit quicker, but I thought overall it was a great movie, and it's right there in the middle of my list. I mean, I think it's a really great Marvel movie. It's just not the best or the worst. It's like right there.
Oh yeah,
a nice definitive ending to the franchise.
Yeah, to that trilogy for sure. Number 16 for me goes to the original Black Panther. Again, another middle of the road one. I just feel like I had to watch this one a couple times to start to grow my fondness for it. I really think for me, and I love Michael B. Jordan, but I felt like he was a little, the first like time I watched it, I felt like he was a little just too much. So like I felt like he was overacting a little bit, but then the more I watched it, the more like I got used to it, or at least his interpretation, and I started to grow more of a fondness to it. But Black Panther is definitely one of my favorite characters, but this is like a middle of the road movie, not one that I won't turn off, but I'll throw it on every once in a while. So Black Panther at number 16.
Well, my number 16 is also Black Panther, but it's
That's
Wakanda
hilarious.
Forever.
Oh.
Yeah. I thought this was I know I keep saying this, but I think it was a beautiful tribute to Chadwick.
Yeah.
We saw more of Wakanda, which I loved. We dove a little bit deeper into Shuri and that background and those characters. And of course the beautiful introduction of Namor. And I thought that was brilliantly done. I loved the portrayal of the character, and he might be in a little bit of trouble in the real world too. Maybe sort of been accused of rape.
Yeah.
Can we do a better screening process, Marvel?
Yeah, right. Like,
just saying. But he was a great Namor, and I like how they tweaked the origin a little bit of Namor, but I liked how they did it. They did that, what I was talking about, grounding it a little bit more realistic. Loved all of that. I just think, again, though, the word I keep coming back to for these middle-of-the-line movies for me is filler. Mm-hmm. We needed to introduce Namor. We needed to introduce the new T'Challa moving forward with where we know is going to be the new Black Panther coming down the line. And we needed to close off some stuff about what and with Killmonger and those things. And so they did that. And I felt like it was a really good movie, really touching movie, and they did everything they were supposed to do. But that's it. That's what they did.
I understand that one. Number 15 for me is Thor 3, Ragnarok, which I think that's like a 14 spot difference between the two that we have. I just really enjoyed this one because it was fun. It was entertaining. I was hoping, it was going to be a one-off in the type of, like theme that they had going on, but as we all know from both of our 32nd pick, that it was not. But yeah, I mean, it was just a fun movie that I felt like wasn't necessarily like the best thing or the worst thing. I was sad that that their planet got destroyed. That's super sad. But I mean, at least there wasn't a villain that was a planet. So yeah, that is what it is. But number 15 for me, Thor Ragnarok.
Okay, my number 15, the original Ant-Man. I loved this movie. I thought it was perfect blend of comedy with enough action. It was more comedy than action and drama, but had the stuff. It was a nice introduction. We got the flashback with the original Ant-Man and Wasp, with the digital technology, kind of a, but I thought it was a great setup for Scott and how it was all going to play out again. But this is one of those things where, okay, we need to introduce this character. Do we need a whole movie to do it?
Right.
You don't necessarily, but this one worked. It took a whole movie, and I thought they showed the history of Ant-Man, setting up the new Ant-Man, and they did it effectively and gave us a good movie. And so that's why I got that.
I was about to say,
15.
I feel like that's kind of a special one about the Ant-Man franchise, is because you got introduced to the original Ant-Man, but then they went in a different direction with Scott Lang instead of Hank Pym. I thought that was a different perspective. Yeah. So that's really good. Number 14 for me is Age of Ultron. I really like Age of Ultron because I felt like this is the perfect dynamic between serious tone and comedic tone. When they're all sitting back having a good time trying to lift Thor's hammer with that comedic tone, but then you have the seriousness of you killed my family, blah blah blah, and fucking like setting up all the different stuff that is happening. But it is a setup movie, I mean, recognizably. But I think it is very interesting to bring in such an interesting character that is the Scarlet Witch, who starts off as a bad guy and then finishes as a good guy. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, number 14 for me, Age of Ultron, Avengers Age of Ultron.
Well, there you go. And that one scene sets up a lot of stuff. Not only does it obviously set up Civil War and that start of that discord, but it also sets up one of the greatest things in cinematic history when you see Cap start to move that hammer.
So good.
Also captures Thor perfectly. That's what I'm talking about. The arrogance that he shows there. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
How are you even moving it? You shouldn't even be able to twinge it.
Yeah.
I'm the only fucking god in the room. That's Thor.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, in the Avengers movies, they get Thor right. So I liked that. I thought it was just a great scene, and it was a good movie. My number 14 is Black Widow. I thought Black Widow is the opposite of a filler movie. It's a clean it all up movie. There were so many plot points that they had referenced throughout basically the first half of the MCU that needed to be cleared up, right? What was the relationship between Hawkeye and Natasha? What was the relationship between Natasha and Hulk? Where did she go from Russian spy and the Black Widow program to the Avengers, and how did she start working for Fury, and what was the family dynamic? They hinted at this throughout the whole first 5, 6, 7 movies after she was introduced, but they never clarified it. And so this movie was necessary to fill those gaps, to give us those answers. And I thought they did it brilliantly. I mean, they nailed all the characters in there. Taskmaster, kind of a hit or miss with me, but I don't think it was horribly done. I just think it could have been done, and I hope that we readdress that character down the line. But overall, I thought it was a really good movie and a nice ending, if you will, but also beginning for that character.
All right, number 13 for me. This one was kind of difficult. Like we talked about at the beginning. Like, basically, when you get to a certain point, you're like, argh! Like, it was very hard because it is one of my favorite Marvel movies. And I'm talking about Spider-Man Far From Home, the second one. So that's the Spider-Man sequel. I really enjoyed Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. I really enjoyed them being like out of the country. I think it was Italy, right? I think it was Italy, like Italy or like somewhere over there.
Europe.
It's that area.
Yes.
Doctor Strangeness right there. But it was one of those that it didn't fulfill me enough to where I could put it in my top 10. So that's why number 13 for me is Spider-Man Far From Home.
Okay. My number 13 is one of, I don't know if I can say this the right way, but I'm going to try to say this anyway.
Good luck.
One of my all-time favorite Marvel movies, but I couldn't put it at the top of my list or in my top 5. But it's one of my all-time favorites. I think that they did a really good job of introducing this aspect of the MCU universe. I thought it was a brilliant mix of comedy and action and drama and even some turmoil and like darkness. There was a little darkness to it. I'm talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
So good.
Amazing. I thought they did everything right with that film. This is an origin movie that went above and beyond just the standard origin movie, right? I mean, and this is a perfect example of what Eternals did wrong that they did right. There was a bit of a backstory in the first act explaining the father, explaining the Ten Rings, explaining how Shang-Chi fits into it, right? But it didn't take too long. It didn't feel like it took forever to develop. We got it. We understood it. Now it's present time and we're in the story.
Yeah.
And I think they just did it right with that. And it's one of my, and the action, I mean, come on. It was so brilliant. The fighting scenes is just like, and Ben Kingsley making fun of one of the most horrible things in the Iron Man movies, right? Like the total disaster of the Ten Rings. They got it right, the Mandarin, and to poke fun at that, it made it even better for me.
I agree. That's why my number 12 is Iron Man 3, because I really enjoyed that whole dynamic. I enjoyed like the goofiness that was the whole Ben Kingsley, quote unquote, first Mandarin interpretation. I thought that was funny. I thought it was really well done. And of course, like I said before, being just such a huge Iron Man fan and like seeing all the suits, seeing all the technology, and just that was actually one of the first ever movies I went and saw in theaters multiple times. Avengers was the first one I did, so we can sense a trend that we really enjoy these MCU movies.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed Iron Man 3. That's why I had to put it at my top 12. But yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic because I completely understand where you're coming from. But yeah, like I said before, I love Iron Man so much, so it was hard to not put all 3 of them in my top 20. So there's my number 12.
Hey, I love Iron Man too, and let's be honest about it. I mean, I'll talk about it later on, but I mean, Iron Man was necessary.
It was.
So
necessary.
Okay, I just want to preface that my number 12 and my number 11 are basically, I consider like one movie. Think Superman 1 and Superman 2. I think this was just one long-ass movie that they broke up into 2 movies and had to flip-flop the schedule of when they were released because of the whole COVID shit. So, but anyway, my number 12 is Spider-Man No Way Home. It's one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, obviously. I think they did a brilliant job. It's the multiverse is in full swing. We're introducing everything that's kind of going on and what happens when the multiverse gets fucked up. It shows drama. It shows sadness. It shows action. It shows comedy. It literally banks on every single thing that you can go through in a story. And I think it did it brilliantly. And I think that's all Tom Holland and that cast, Zendaya, and how they're able to pull that all together. I just don't think it works with any other Spider-Man. And that's not to say anything against the other Spider-Mans. I just think that the way they do that, he pulls it off with, like, you buy it. You just believe it, that he's feeling the stuff. And more so, I'll talk about it in one of the Avengers movies, but just the way he delivers his lines, you're empathetic, whether it's funny or sad or mad or like what. He just has a delivery that you buy it as Peter Parker. That's all I'm saying.
I agree, man. I agree. I mean, I feel like Tom Holland is definitively the Spider-Man.
Me too.
Like, he is that guy. Number 11 for me goes to Spider-Man Homecoming, the first Spider-Man that came out from Tom Holland. I just think, it was, I don't know, it was very hard. The top 10 and the inching into the top 10 was so freaking difficult because, again, like you just said, this is one of my all-time Marvel movies. It went Iron Man, as I've been saying this whole time. Iron Man is by far my favorite character, but obviously since his passing and moving on, my favorite characters now are Spider-Man and Shang-Chi. Those two, I feel like something about their dynamic and their home lives and what they're able to do with people who aren't necessarily their family, so they build relationships outside of their family, and the beautifulness that is, their personalities. So that's why they dive into it. But yeah, I put Spider-Man Homecoming as number 11 just because I don't even know. The love interest, I feel like, I understand they were setting up Zendaya as Mary Jane, but I felt like the love interest in that one was a little bit of waste of time, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's really it. That's the only reason why it inched out of my top 10. But it's so good. I love it. I can put that one on at any point in time. Any of my top 10 I can put out at any point in time and just sit down and watch. Number 11 for me, Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yes. And I agree with all of that, and it's kind of like where I'm going with my list here. Same type attitude with the characters and different things like that. And like I said, it was all kind of one movie for me. My number 11 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and it continues upon what they set up in Spider-Man No Way Home. With the ramifications of what happens when it all goes wrong, right? This movie is setting up all kinds of things.
It is.
That it ties into Loki, right? It ties into Kang. It ties into the multiverse. It ties into Secret Wars. It finally sets up, because for anybody who doesn't know, they're going with the newer Secret Wars in the 2000s, not the 80s. Although I have a strong feeling we're going to see aspects of the 80s Secret Wars in there as well. But what happens when these multiverse Earths start to collide, and what happens that causes them to not exist and become one universe, where the multiverse collapses and there's only one, and we see that it sets that up. You see it start to happen. And it's necessary because Secret Wars, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And so no spoilers, but if you're a comic book geek, you know that the end of Secret Wars is inevitably going to set up where there's one MCU. And so you're seeing the setup of the Fantastic Four. You're seeing the setup of mutants. You're seeing the setup of all these different things, the Marvel Illuminati and the different things that are going to happen when this Secret Wars happens. This is the movie that tells you how they're going to bring the Fox characters into the MCU, right? They're in an alternate Earth, but at one point will be the same Earth after Secret Wars, right? Sets all that up. But the reason I love this movie, the reason it's at my number 11 and probably could have been in my top 10 if I'm being completely honest,
right?
is Lizzie Olsen and Scarlet Witch, right? You hinted at the fact she started off a villain in Age of Ultron, becomes a good guy, but she's a villain. That has been her character in the comic books her entire run. Remember, this is Magneto's daughter, which I'm sure at some point we're going to find out in the MCU. She has been back and forth her entire comic book history. I'm a villain, I'm a good guy. I'm a villain, I'm a good guy. Maybe I'm both. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm really evil the whole time. And they finally did that, right? Because the best thing about villains is that they think they're not villains. They think they're doing it for the right reason. She's doing it because she wants her children back into existence. She wants to just be a mom. She wants to right the wrongs of what she thinks happened with Thanos. That's what makes the best villain. But the scene where she just freaking takes out the Illuminati and where Professor X is pleading with her and she just like, that was like, we are seeing full-on Scarlet Witch right there. That is the Scarlet Witch. We saw hints of that in WandaVision, but then we got it all out in there. So that is why it's one of my all-time favorite movies and right on the cusp of my top 10. I think had it been anybody but Lizzie playing Scarlet Witch, maybe not. Maybe it's higher up in my list, of towards the back half of the list instead of the front. But Lizzie she was perfect casting for that role, and she pulled off the villain in like the most epic way. And I thought Sam Raimi delivered. I know you were talking about thriller, horror, but for me, it just touched on everything that I wanted to see with Scarlet Witch. Yeah. And that's why I loved it so much.
Yeah, I think a lot of our differing opinions on this comes from the comic book side. And me not being much of a comic book person, only coming at it from the film side. So I feel like that's where a lot of it. Now, heading into the top 10.
Yes.
There's going to be two on here that I feel like maybe getting a lot of heat on my side of things. At least from the fans. I think you'll understand where I'm coming from with them. But number 10 for me is Black Panther 2. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. That's right. I put it before Spider-Man Homecoming. I put it before, the original Guardians, like a couple of these different ones, because I just thought it was so touching. I was literally crying the first 10 minutes of it. The pacing was a little fast at the beginning, and as we've been saying, I'm a pacing guy, and so with that, I was like, slow the fuck down, and which they did. I love her becoming the new Black Panther. I thought she looked amazing in the suit. The whole Namor storyline was super badass. Indigenous people bringing in to that sort of aspect of the MCU, I thought was absolutely amazing. And we're just big Ryan Coogler fans, so it was really hard for me not to put one of the Black Panthers in the top 10. But yeah, I think I'm really excited with what they set up with this film, because the whole T'Challa has a son. T'Challa, leaves along this legacy, and Ironheart stepping into that role, and how we're still going to have a little bit of that. And I'm curious, is Pepper going to mentor her at all? Or like all of these different aspects that I'm just so excited for the future and so excited for these characters. So that's why I wanted to put Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever at my number 10 spot, and that was very difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all of that. I really enjoyed Shuri also as Black Panther, but I don't think we're going to get enough of it, because they clearly set up T'Challa, and I think we're going to see a time jump, and he's going to be...
That'd be sad.
But that's where they're going, because he's going to be the new Black Panther in the Young Avengers, and that he's going to take the mantle. And where does that leave her? Will she become somebody else, which would be awesome, because I think we need to see more of that story, and I'm hoping that we do. But the idea that they didn't have to go out of their way to say his actual name is T'Challa. Yeah. They did that because they want you to know, what other reason is there to name him T'Challa other than to say he is going to be Black Panther?
Yeah.
They needed to figure out a way after Boseman's death to still have T'Challa as Black Panther, and this is the way they're going to do it.
This is the way.
This is the way. That's right. To take from another franchise, right? My number 10 is the Avengers, the first Avengers. I thought it's the first time it's ever been done, right, in film history, to take characters from all these movies and put them together in one film where they have built this franchise, where they have built this universe, and now they're all a team and they're in this movie. Say what you will about Josh Whedon or not Josh Whedon or whatever, but he effectively did it. He got all the characters right. My biggest complaint about this movie was the costume design with Captain America.
Yeah.
Just stick with the, like his costume sucked. But, I mean, the characters, how they came together, how they were brought to the introduction of Loki, all this kind of stuff, all spot on. The dynamic between Hulk and Thor, the little back and forth fun where they're beating each other down, but then there's the respect there kind of sort of too. Same thing between Cap and Iron Man. You can tell right away there's that little
that tension
kind of thing. The mystery behind Natasha, where does she fit in? Hawkeye trying to figure out how he fits in with no powers or no special abilities other than the bow. And like all of that. I just thought everything about this movie was the right way to do it. And they accomplished it. And I saw it, I can't even tell you how many times. I saw it on midnight, back before they started playing these things at like 4 p.m. on a Thursday.
Yeah.
It was actually a midnight showing on Friday. I just, how could it not be in the top 10? It's like the first time it's ever happened and they did it right. And it's like the brilliant culmination of the first phase of the movies. And it was fantastic. It was freaking fantastic.
It's so good. It's so good. Number 9 for me, and this might get me a lot of hate with it being so low on the list, is Avengers Infinity War. Again, we go back to pacing. There was a slower paced film that I was just like, but it was really good. It was really enjoyable. But at the same time, I think I've only watched it maybe 1 or 2 times in general. I've watched Endgame like at least 5 or 6 times, but I think I've only watched Infinity War like 1 or 2 times. I'm just not the biggest fan. I understand filmmakers' like decisions and how you go with the storyline. I'm not the biggest fan of leaving things like that unresolved the way that one was left unresolved, because we're so used to this formula, which the good guy always wins. So with this one coming out, I was like, oh my God. So I think that's probably why I put it so low on my list. It's still like one of my favorites and one of the best ones of all time, but I know that one is some people's number 1. So, I mean, yeah, send the hate mail. Send the hate mail. Number 9 for me, Avengers Infinity War. Yeah.
All right. My number 9 is the original Guardians of the Galaxy. I had to be in my top 10 because this was one of those, if it works, it's going to work. And if it doesn't, could have definitively put a huge strike in the MCU and maybe killed the MCU.
Yeah.
But this was an attempt to say, because Iron Man, unless you were a comic book fan, was a lesser known character, right?
Yeah.
But still, he was a cool superhero. To take a group that, unless you were a comic book fan, you had no fucking idea who they were, and you're talking about a talking raccoon and a talking tree and like this weird shit. That's a huge risk, right? And then to say that the opening movie's not going to even tell you who these people are, we're just going to jump right in. And for Gunn to be able to do it and the way that he did it, it was incredible. And it cemented the fact that Marvel could basically take anybody from their stable of characters, the most recluse, unknown, minuscule characters that nobody has ever heard of, and turn them into a massive blockbuster. This movie did it, and showed that why they are what they are, why the MCU is so successful. So kudos to them. Had to be in the top 10. Had to be. I'm just saying he could probably take Squirrel Girl and make it work. I'm just saying it's that kind of Marvel. Just works. Yeah. Even their weird ass characters just work.
Yeah. So this is the next one for me at number 8, the number 8 spot. is very controversial, and I think, again, we differ about 9 spots, I believe. So number 8 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I just really freaking enjoyed it. Guardians, like, Rocket is my favorite Guardian, so that's probably why it ranks so high up on the list. And like with the emotional factor of his backstory, and with his first ever words where it hurt, like it was tear jerking, man. And it is such a breath of fresh air to have this one come out in a time where I feel like Marvel is not at its peak anymore, or at least at the moment. So it was so refreshing to see Marvel being Marvel again. So that was really enjoyable. But yeah, I really enjoyed it all the way through. I really enjoyed the villain. I felt like he was at, Kang the Conqueror level, like the way the actor portrayed the villain. And yeah, I just felt like it was a good send-off of, like we said, those characters and how that all played out. So, yeah, number 8 for me, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
I love it. My number 8, Spider-Man Homecoming. I could not love this movie more. I think it was absolutely brilliant. This is the definitive way to introduce a character without an origin story. Mm-hmm. Like, it showed it just was not necessary. I thought it was just in my opinion, it was a great setup with the mentorship between Tony and Peter. And where Peter's thought process was coming, Peter trying to figure it out, right? That am I a superhero? Am I not? Or what he thinks a superhero is, and being starkly reminded what it is not. And just the teenager trying to figure it all out. And I think they got it all right. I think they just did a great job of finally giving us Spider-Man. As awesome as the first Spider-Man was with Tobey Maguire, there were some things like the weird web without the web slinger, and like there was just some stuff that was. This was definitively Spider-Man, and it was right from start to finish, and so it's hard to not have it in there in the top 10, because it's like, thank you. Hence Homecoming. You brought him home and you got him right, and it was just like, it was amazing.
Yeah, it is very difficult not to have that one. Like I said, it's on the borderline, man. It's on the borderline. Number 7 for me goes to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, like you talked about. I mean, this was by far the best new character that they introduced. I just felt like everything was so genuine about his character, the love and passion he has for the people around him, and the overall fight sequences I felt like were just absolutely amazing. I mean, the bus sequence when he's fighting off the goons, and then bringing out that dragon, man, from like not only the big baddie dragon that was hidden behind the wall or whatever, but the dragon that was the savior and was the good one that helped them conquer the other one. I just felt like everything about this movie was so family oriented and wholesome. And just to be able to, bring that type of diversity with the Asian community into the MCU, I felt like was a very special experience. And I'm so excited to see what his character leads into with the dude from Doctor Strange. Like, I'm so excited. So that, like I said before, one of my favorite new characters and one of my favorite characters of all time now. But yeah, Shang-Chi at number 7.
And how they very, very shadily, but very brilliantly introduced us to the realm of Iron Fist.
Yeah, they did.
And how Iron Fist is good. Because remember, guys, there's more than one dragon or 2 dragons. There's a whole bunch. And Iron Fist guards one. And how they were able to sneak that in there, and how there's Spider-Man Far From Home or No Way Home set up Daredevil, kind of introduced. Shang-Chi set up Luke, Iron Fist. And so I like how we're getting there, bringing that stuff in. I thought that was just brilliant. Speaking of
brilliant,
my number 7, Spider-Man Far From Home. The reason this one is above No Way Home, I just like Far From Home is, in my opinion, first of all, they took the goofiest ass fucking villain, Mysterio, with this glass fucking dome and like basically a failed magician type guy, and made him a badass and made him kind of cool. And I thought the dynamic between Gyllenhaal and Holland was really outstanding, and just but it's the introduction of the multiverse. Yeah. Wait a minute. There's more than one universe? What the fuck is going on? What do you mean? And kind of the way they did that, I thought it was a brilliant way to introduce it into it, right? Just enough to get you going, what? But not enough to give it away yet, right? And then the other thing for me is what I was just basically talking about with the first Spider-Man movie about him and what it is to be a superhero and what it is not and everything is... This movie, Far From Home, when he thinks he has it all figured out and he's taken the mentorship from Tony and he's got it and people are kind of thinking Spider-Man's cool and this is a great guy, fucks it all up. Yeah. He's like, once you think you got it, you don't. And that's the other bad thing about being a superhero, that it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And it's not always going to be the way you want it to be. And you're going to get people hurt. And you're going to have to keep that kind of... And I thought this movie, again, the evolution of Peter... and him being Spider-Man and what that means, I thought was done extremely well in this movie. So that's why that's my number right there.
For sure.
I just think I love the evolution of Spider-Man.
Yeah. This next one, you're going to be a little offended it's not in my top 5. I'm just preparing you now. Number 6 for me goes to the original Iron Man, the one that kicks us all off. You
can't even have this list without it. This list literally doesn't exist without it.
I know. Okay, I get it. I get where you're coming from. I understand. But I don't know. Something about origin stories. That's really the only thing. It's just something about origin stories. But other than that, everything's so amazing. That's why it's so high on the list. Of course, it's literally, this shows my age a little bit, not to hurt your feelings, but it was literally the first film I ever saw in the movie theaters by myself. I was so freaking impressed, and like it made me feel some type of way. Like when I was walking out and the ending credits ends with Black Sabbath's Iron Man, like it gets you pumped up. It's so motivating and it's so cool, and how they ended it with I am Iron Man. Like, yeah, fuck that shit. Don't hide that. Like, it's so awesome. Like, I just love everything about it. So yeah, that's why it's number 6 on my list, but I get it. It's not in the top 5, and a lot of people are going to hate me for it, but oh well.
Okay.
Yeah. No words.
Yeah. So maybe you'll be mad at me for this one for not being in the top 5.
Disappointed,
but number 6 for me is Black Panther, the original Black Panther. Could have it been in my top 5? Maybe. I think so. But it definitely, it's right there. It's right there. Yeah. And the reason it's right there is, one, the brilliant performances by everybody in the film. The brilliant direction by Ryan Coogler. The brilliant costume design. The brilliant production design. Everything about this movie was stellar. And anytime you get a film that so deeply ingrains itself into pop culture, where years later you have people Wakanda forever, and what that movement meant for not just the African American community, but for fucking Africa itself. Yeah. And that heritage and that history. On top of the superhero aspect of it all, and the technology, the worlds of technology and old school meeting and like all this. I just think this is the first time anything had ever been broadly done on screen like that since the original Superman, with the Crystal Fortress of Solitude and the emergence of technology and alien type stuff with old school heritage of, like, I think it was the first time that I had seen it done in a superhero movie successfully on film since then. Yeah. And it was brilliant. And it says, you can come from the jungles of Africa and have this high-end technology, and you can have this heritage but still be new school. And just everything worked. Everything worked. And it worked because of Coogler and Chadwick Boseman. And it was a brilliant movie. And I can't imagine the MCU without it. And so that's why it's my number 6. I know maybe could have been in the top 5, but it's right there. It's right there.
It's right there, man. It's right there. Now we've made it. We have made it to our top 5 Marvel MCU movies of all time. This one is very difficult. It was very hard. Number 5 for me is Avengers Endgame. Honestly, it was my favorite for so long, by far. But I'm going back and rewatching a lot of them over the past couple years and just thinking about the overall impact it had for not only me but the cinematic universe in general. It was hard to put movies above those, but I still came out with 4 above it. But Avengers Endgame is honestly, I think, one of the best movies of all time. I think it's so damn good, obviously, with the amount of money it made at the box office overall. Like, it's an amazing film that I don't care it's 3 hours long. I will put that on if I have nothing else to do and just literally watch it. It is so damn entertaining. And of course, I mean, the last fight sequence, I think that's that's the best fight sequence we've ever seen for any sort of either action movie, cinematic, or hero movie, or anything like that. That last hour, 45 minutes is just absolutely amazing. I start crying when that motherfucker picks up the hammer, okay? Like, it's honestly the first time I had ever seen or heard or been a part of a crowd erupting, and it was a spectacle that I don't think you can ever recreate. So that's why number 5 for me is Avengers Endgame.
All right, my number 5, and I agree with a lot of what you just said, which is, I'll get to it in a minute. But my number 5 is Iron Man. And because you can't have any of this without Iron Man, yes. I thought, and thankfully, because we've been seeing a lot of miscommunication with the stories here, even from Favreau, which I was totally confused about, because Favreau has well documented in the past this, but the original president of Marvel Studios, which you may or may not have known was not Kevin Feige, came out and clarified it, and I'm glad that he did. They went to war to get Robert Downey Jr. At that time, when they made Iron Man, it was not a Marvel Studios picture. It was a Paramount picture, and Paramount did not want Robert Downey Jr. They wanted Tom Cruise, and when they didn't get Tom Cruise, they had other people in mind. They were like, no way, shape, or form are we taking a chance on a has-been actor who's got a drug problem and an alcohol problem. And Favreau said, he is fucking Tony Stark. Tony Stark has an alcohol problem. He has drug problems. He has a Playboy syndrome kind of. He literally is the character, and went to bat for it and refused to go anywhere else. And so the first president said, I'm going to go to bat for it. I stand by Favreau. This is your guy. And if you don't do this guy, we're making a huge mistake. They finally convinced Ike back then, like, who now thankfully is the fuck out of there. But they finally convinced him, and they went with it, and the rest is history. This guy was a flawed character, a flawed man playing a flawed character who rose above it to become the man that he was meant to be. He's the literal definition of Tony Stark. Yeah. In real life and superhero. He's a real life superhero in what he has overcome because of Iron Man, and now where he is in his life because of this movie. And so how can you not have that? It's like the epitome of a winning story all the way around. Let's take a chance on a guy that needs redemption and hope that the redemption leads to something greater. And that's exactly what it's done. It led to something greater, not only for the MCU, but for him himself and for all those who followed in his footsteps, trying to make a comeback, trying to say, I made a mistake, but I can come back. That's for me what Iron Man stands for. I take it out of just the movie and I take, what was the story of Iron Man? What does it stand for? It's the ultimate story of a man who made mistakes that redeems himself to become the hero. And for me, I mean, it was a given. It had to be there in the top 5. Yeah, had to be.
I understand. Number 4 for me goes to the original Avengers. This one, it makes me like, this is one of the best movies I feel like in the MCU, obviously. But just the feeling that I get after watching it, just the amount of like, you can see that they have this thing planned out so far, and they have so many different ideas from this film that you can see that it's going to be something that is very, very instrumental in the entertainment industry for the foreseeable future, which it continues to be. So I feel like the amount of setup they did for the original Avengers movie was just so damn good. And it was such an amazing thing to see them all come together. And that first time where you see them all together on the ship and talking to each other and giving each other shit, it's just such an amazing thing. And like, yeah, that what you were just talking about when Cap's like, what are you without your armor? Well, playboy, philanthropist, like all this different shit. Like, it's just such a good banter back and forth. And you see Hulk go crazy. Like we said, Mark Ruffalo, first appearance, and that whole dynamic. So something special about the first Avengers movie. That's why I put it in my top 5. So number 4 for me, The Avengers.
Like I said, I thought they did a really good job with Ruffalo carrying on. What I liked about The Incredible Hulk was that when you hear Cap say, Hulk, smash, and he smiles like, fuck yeah, that's what Hulk does. I fucking smash shit. Like, I loved that. Everything about that movie was fantastic. I agree with you. My number 4, Avengers Infinity War. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I put this near the top of my list because everybody was wondering with the original Avengers, how can you top that? How can you culminate that, right?
Yeah.
Well, we can take all these fucking characters and put them into a fucking movie and still make it better than what the original Avengers was when you're like, holy shit, they're putting 5 people? Now how about 50 fucking people in a movie? So on the level that it did. But what I really liked about Avengers Infinity War was the first time that we see and you get a glimpse of what's coming, sacrifice. There are consequences and there are things that you know, realism of this is the world and shit doesn't always end well. And Infinity War is when it first started to set it up. Like there you were drawn to this movie because you were invested in these characters, and oh shit, characters that you were invested in fucking died.
Yeah, literally.
What? Like, I mean, I remember seeing that movie in the theater and the people, like literal tears as if they were at a family member's fucking funeral when Peter died.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to bring that type of emotion and that type of investment to a character in a story, in a film, is what I think every filmmaker dies for. Like that's the whole goal.
Yeah.
And I thought that movie just, I can't, it just was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's what actually leads into my number 3, which is I feel like the best filmmaker's film of the MCU. My number 3 goes to Winter Soldier. I think this one is by far like the most cinematically pleasing when it comes to practical effects and to the storyline, the dynamic between a friend who might not necessarily be that person they once were, and all of the different dynamic between, you know, Captain America and Bucky. So I just love it for that reason. The dialogue is just absolutely amazing. You feel that connection that they had and that friendship that Cap is continuing to fight for. It's just such a beautiful thing. And then plus, I think it was Winter Soldier where it's not the elevator scene, but it's the helicopter scene where he's literally pulling back the helicopter. That man was fucking jacked, dog. Like, it was crazy. Like, that, I thought that was like just an epic kind of thing. So that's why at number 3 I have Winter Soldier, Captain America.
There you go. My number 3, Endgame. It's the in my opinion, the definitive group superhero movie.
It
like
is.
saga movie that had everything from start to finish. It got every single Marvel character right. Every single thing that every comic book geek wanted, everything that didn't have a fucking clue about comic books wanted, and every filmmaker wanted. They can say all they want to, all of them. Scorsese, all of them. This movie had everything a fucking filmmaker wanted. It had heart. It had story. It had acting. It had production value. It had everything that a filmmaker looks to do with a film this movie had. And in my opinion, honestly, one of, if not the greatest scene ever put on film. When that hammer comes flying into his hand and he says, Avengers Assemble, I mean, that's one of the most cinematic masterpiece scenes ever put on film. I would line that up with the Citizen Kanes and the fucking Gone with the Winds and that movie and the crowd. Like, I don't give a fuck what theater you were in. Every crowd's like, fuck yeah. And that was the payoff from Ultron and the amount of respect. Again, the only movies that get Thor right. That is a god who knew this man is worthy of my hammer. Even more so why the fucking ridiculous love story shit in fucking Love and Thunder. This is a man who knew what the hammer meant. And this man was worthy to wield it. And that culmination of the respect between them, just like everything about that scene was just fucking like amazing. It was fucking amazing. The call out to On Your Left when Sam comes flying through.
Oh my
right?
God.
We're not done yet. On your left, here come the whole rest of it. Like, so fucking good. I mean, whoo,
yeah,
that movie,
it gets you
man.
pumped up. It makes you want to watch it.
I do want to fucking watch it again. I go and watch. I'm not even going to lie. Marvel released the clip of the crowd reacting. I go watch that sometimes. I just fucking love. That's why everybody says, why do you always go see it in the theater? Why on opening night? Why on opening night? Because that shit happens on opening night, exactly. Not after it's spoiled. That shit only happens at Comic-Con in Hall H or at opening night in the theaters. Exactly. And so that's why I'm going, no matter what my feelings are towards Ezra. I'm going because I know definitively when Keaton shows up, I'm going to get that type reaction in my theater, and I can't wait for that shit.
I love it.
So Avengers Endgame, my number 3.
Number 2 for me goes to Captain America Civil War.
Yes.
This dynamic was completely different, like Infinity War. We had never seen anything like this before, where the good guys are fighting against each other. Not just one or two good guys, but all of the good guys are fighting against each other, fighting for what is right, and that is what society is. We have differing opinions about different things. We all want the best possible outcome, but we just approach it differently, and I just felt like this movie represented society in such a beautiful way. But it was just, of course it's geared more towards one side, but I felt like they did a really good job about it not being biased, I mean, you really had to pick a side. Which one were you on? Were you Team Cap or were you Team Iron Man? So it was a very interesting dynamic what they did, and then plus introducing Spider-Man, because that was the first time we saw Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and just, again, everybody fighting against each other, and that sets up the next phase of what the MCU was. And I just felt like that time era between, like, I want to say like 2012 when first Avengers came out to probably right after Endgame, that stretch of 8 years, they were putting out hit after hit, like flawless movies in my opinion. So absolutely loved every single one of them. But yeah, number 2 for Civil War, just because it's so damn good. I mean, there's nothing else you can really say. It's just a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
No, it's my number 2 also, and for all those reasons, I do like how it was a photo of society.
It is.
It was literally a true representation of where we're at in society and still at in society, with the split down the middle, with both sides thinking they're right and both sides having valid points, even when they're doing something you don't necessarily agree with. Because you could feel for both Cap and Iron Man. They were both right in what they were trying to achieve. You can't be both. Yeah. So, and then also the understanding at the end of getting that. Listen, we're never going to agree on this, but we can agree to not agree and still be together. And even though that rift took a little bit, you can see that start to play out at the end of this movie. And it had to be on my list of 1 or 2 because it is the introduction of Spider-Man, and it's the first time ever that you see Spider-Man done right, because it's the first time you ever see on screen, and this has nothing to do with any of the other costume designers. Kudos. I thought all of the Spider-Man costumes were pretty fucking badass. But this is the first time you ever fucking see the comic book come to life where his eyes fucking move. Holy shit. Like all the other costumes, all the other Spider-Mans, his eyes never moved. It was just a mask. But in the comic books, you see when he gets excited, the eyes go up. When he gets mad, they squint. And you're like, and now we finally fucking have it. The emotion with the eyes moving. I was like, yes! Holy shit, we've got fucking Spider-Man! Like, it was so good. As a comic book geek, you're like, there he is! There's fucking Spider-Man. Oh, it was so good. It was so fucking good. So yeah, my number 2, Civil War, man.
I love it. I love it. Now, number 1 for me, after 32 movies, woo! My number 1 goes out to Spider-Man No Way Home. I say that because, as I've said previously, Spider-Man is now my favorite MCU character. And I just feel like what this movie did, it brought back my childhood. I am all about connecting to different things and how it makes you feel, and I'm a very emotional person. And so to be able to bring back Tobey Maguire, because that was the first ever superhero movie I had seen in theaters, being my age. Like, the original Spider-Man, that was like the pinnacle. Like, that was absolutely amazing. The first and second one were just so freaking great and did amazing at the box office. Like, first time ever breaking $100 million for an opening weekend domestically.
Yep.
That is absolutely crazy. So to bring that back, and even to bring back Andrew Garfield, which a lot of people hated on, and to have that whole dynamic of all of them actually talking to each other. And I really have to credit Spider-Man Into the Spider-Universe, the animated one, for giving Marvel the opportunity to even think about this idea, because before that, I don't think that would have even have been a thing. But I felt like it was a very emotional movie. It was in-game level-esque when they come through the portal, where you finally see these Spider-Men come back and just create such an atmosphere to where you are reminiscent of your childhood. You are reminiscent of what it was like, 5, 6, 7 years ago when Andrew Garfield's came out, and the dynamic between the love interests. Andrew Garfield's love interest died, and how that impacted his character, and how Tom Holland approached the way he was going to do things. So it's all of these different things. And it was just an utterly beautiful shot film. That scene where Tom Holland is sitting down in the rain, and it's the LED sign, like, poster, and it's just flickering back and forth, and that's in the rain. It just looks so damn beautiful. Literally nothing was being said, but that shot made me cry, because that's how much I love filmmaking and how much I love color tones and that different things. But that's why, as you can tell, this film makes me feel some type of way, and so that's why I had to put it at my number 1, Spider-Man No Way Home.
There you go.
So
it's hard to argue any of that. It's a fucking brilliant film, and we finally see Spider-Man come into who he is at the very end of it. I'm going to make my suit again. It's going to be this, and I'm not going to have to rely on anybody but me.
Yeah.
And I love that. And the redemption aspect of when Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man saves MJ, that redemption of not being able to save Gwen, but saving MJ. And so that was brilliant, and just like,
so good. So good.
Really good. My number 1 is my number 1 for a couple of different reasons. My number 1 is Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And the reason it's my number 1, the reason that I think it is definitively the best Marvel movie ever made, is for a couple of reasons. One, because of all the knocking of all the superhero film, superhero genre. It's not this, it's not that, it is this, it is that. I think definitively this film took a superhero and made it a non-superhero film. This was just a film. This was a political spy thriller. That's what this was. It was a drama. It was story driven. It just happened to have a superhero in it.
Yep.
That's what it was. So I think this was a definitive slap back to all the critics of superhero movies saying they're not real films, they're not real stories, they're over the top sci-fi, whatever, fantasy. The Russo brothers said, no, sir. This is a real movie with a real story, with real characters and real consequences, and we can prove to you that that's what these are. And I think it definitively did that. And I think most people will agree with that. Even the people that want to fucking hate superhero movies will say this film was a film, not a superhero movie. It was a film, and it was a fucking great film. The other reason why I love this story, beyond the redemption factor of Bucky and the never giving up on a friend, loyal to the end kind of storyline, right, is I also feel like this movie definitively defines America. Captain America. This is a man who unwavers from his stance on what he believes America stands for. In the face of all of the corruption, in the face of all the bad stuff that is coming out and how twisted sometimes America can be, all that, Steve Rogers says, we are that fucking city on a hill, the shining city on a hill, the one that everybody aspires to be like, the freedom that everybody wants, and I will not waver in what I stand for or what I believe is to be true. That is the America we all want to live in. That is the America everybody needs across the world, and this movie nails that. So you get from a filmmaking standpoint, it's a brilliant film. From an American standpoint, it's fucking Americana at its absolute best. And it's also a superhero movie.
It's also a superhero movie.
That kicks ass. It has a lot of cool shit in it. Like, the elevator fucking scene is badass. But that's why it's number one for me. You guys know I'm a political junkie. I'm an Americana. I'm a all in on that. I'm a superhero geek from start to finish, have been my whole life. And I'm a filmmaker. And this movie, for me, nailed all fucking three. So It had to be number one for me. It had to be.
That's so funny, man. It was very difficult to try to do this.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It took me over an hour to put all this together.
And it could have been interchanging. I could have just moved them around constantly,
It was very difficult, but we want to know your opinions.
Except for the Thors.
Yeah, that one wasn't hard.
Pretty simple.
Those weren't difficult. We want to know, what is your favorite MCU movies? Give us the top 5 if you want. If you want to do the whole 32, be sure to email us at info@crazyantmedia. We'll listen, we'll look, we'll see if we agree or not, and all the good stuff. It's so fun, guys. It's so freaking fun. But the bonus content is so great because I feel like we can be more personable. We can let you know about all of our thoughts and opinions because you guys know how much we love MCU and superhero films.
Yes.
But you didn't know why we loved all of these movies.
Why we didn't.
Exactly. If anything, you could definitely tell why this man is called the Mouth, and he can get to talking about things you are passionate about.
Well, I mean, comic books, man. Yeah. You can't. You're talking film and comic books. There was no way.
Yeah,
there was no way.
Damn near a whole show worth right here, guys. Oh my goodness! Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell. Subscribe and listen to Inside the Crazy Ant Farm, ITCAF podcast for short, on all podcast platforms. That comes out every single week, either a whole show or an interview. And of course, be sure to visit our website, www.crazyantmedia.com, for all the latest and greatest things that are coming out of Crazy Ant Media. We got a lot going on, guys. We appreciate your love and support. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you again soon.
Yes.